coming in. That way you have a heads up with what's happening. Are we live, Dakota?
You're live.
I see. Okay, back at it again. Welcome in. It's a live stream edition. This is what goes on at the NFL Draft Bible Extravaganza Bonanza Rodeo Show. RSC, the place to be. Rick Saraceno, since 2002. Thanks, Dakota. Our super director, Dakota, letting me know that we're on the air, and I'm already 30 seconds in my intro, constantly staying ahead of the game. 2020 NFL Draft Bible already underway. Make sure you go to NFLDraftBible.com. Use our promo code VIP50. You only know about that if you watch this show. VIP50, you get 50% off the PDF download. That's valid right now. Okay, this is day 2 of our live stream Zooming coverage. We're zooming all the way up until the draft. We'll be here tomorrow with another preview, 10 a.m. Make sure you watch our show yesterday. We read all the tea leaves on the wall. We had Eric Edholm from Yahoo Sports. We had a bunch of player guests. Today, we got Temple Tough, Harrison Hand, the safety, Sean Bradley, the linebacker, Nick Tiano Chattanooga, MVP from the NFL Play Bowl, and Javen White is going to hop on from UNLV, and then also Ike Brown from Florida International. So we're going to go around the horn here. We're going to have Dane Vandernat and Von Hutchins joining us for the second part of the rodeo. Of course, we got the dance party coming up at the end of the show. My goal is to get somebody out of their chair, so stay tuned for that. We're going to go around the horn here. We are so blessed to have all of our scouting and evaluators on the show here to break it all down for you. This is some great analysis, and I enjoyed it. And today, I'm going to introduce our guests, and I've asked them to come up with one thing they've learned throughout the scouting process this season. And one thing that I learned that necessarily doesn't apply to scouting, but maybe to the mainstream media and how information gets out there in 2020. You know, the elimination of pro days is not only impacting and affecting the NFL evaluators and decision makers, but if you notice, there's not as much information leaking out in the mainstream media. Those pro days were valuable gatherings, you know, where you can kind of pick information, people start talking, and you know, that to me is surprising that as I talk to some people out there in the industry, how much those pro days, how valuable it was for those guys and how difficult it's been for them to obtain information, especially with the pandemic. People aren't getting back. People aren't answering calls like they have in years past. So I thought that was an interesting thing that I learned this year. And obviously I might have overlooked that because the pro days can be a little bit tedious to say, why do we do it like this? And, you know, one of the reasons why is to gather information in addition to gathering numbers. So that's the one thing I learned. First up, we've got John Murphy, VP of Player Personnel at the Toronto Argonauts, of course, an NFL Draft Bible original. John, how are we doing this morning?
Doing excellent. I think the biggest thing is, hey, normally it's Taco Tuesday in the household. I think Thursday is going to be Tackle Thursday, you know, when it comes to the draft. So I think that's the biggest thing. We talked about it yesterday. Could there be 5, 6, even more than 6 offensive tackles taken in the first round? And if there are, who are those guys that'll sneak into the back end of the first round? And who do they knock out of the first round would be even more important.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. That seems to be, I think, between the offensive tackles and wide receivers, we had about 15 to 17 at each position. So 1/3 of our top 100 consists of offensive tackles and wide receivers. Joe, that's an outstanding number. Joe Everett is our director of college recruiting, and he joins us now, Joe, in Indianapolis. And John is in Toronto. Joe's in Indianapolis. What's going on, Joseph?
I'm just surviving. If I've learned anything this year, it's hydrate, stock up, don't be afraid to spend on them paper products. But no, trust the tape, block out the noise. And I think I touched on it last episode. Consider your sources where you're getting this information sometimes. I think a lot of people, there's a lot of noise out there this time of year. I think now's more important than ever to just go back to your personal board and believe in what you see.
Yeah, I think that's a really big point that's being emphasized in the draft room. It's back to the scouting, back to the tape, and we don't have as much pollution to crowd those rankings, especially with those every year there's guys that just pop up on the pro day radar and they just test through the roof. It gives you additional homework, like, oh, let me go see, what did I miss? And definitely going to get back to the scouting and see how that impacts teams. Ryan Roberts is our scouting coordinator here at NFL Draft Bible, and he's been breaking it down for 2020, 2021. John is at Draft JM13. Joe is at Joe W. Everett. Ryan Roberts at Rise and Draft. Ryan, good morning. How are you today?
Doing well, Rick. And, it's been a valuable experience this year. I think if there's one thing, to echo Joe to a degree is obviously you need to trust your eyes, trust what you see, don't believe everything you hear, but also don't speak in absolutes. We've heard like 40 different guys so far as, lock first round picks, and it's going to be interesting. It's not it's a wild ride draft season, and there is no absolute this time of year. We don't know what's going to happen, and that's, I think, what is the most entertaining part of the draft process overall. So.
Yeah, I think my mock draft might be as wrong as it's ever been this year. But let's say hello to Dakota Follett. He's the man behind the scenes, switching the turntables on the 1-2s. He'll be taking our questions here. Of course, you can drop us a line at NFL Draft Bible on Twitter. If you're watching on YouTube and drop a question there in the comment section, our guy Dakota is making it happen. How are we today, Dakota?
I'm good. How you guys doing?
Doing good, brother. We appreciate everything that you do. You ready to buckle up? Double chin strap kind of day. Let's do it. RSC Reset, NFLDraftBible.com. Make sure you're following along with the PDF draft guide. And today we're going to have an open roundtable discussion the first half of the show. Second part of the show will be loaded up with our player guests. And we said we would take your questions. We had a bunch yesterday that we didn't get to. So I apologize for that. We will make sure we get as many as we can in today, and we'll kick it right off with the first one coming in from Twitter. Round by round and number of wide receivers, where's the drop-off from likely NFL starter, outside or slot, to likely backup material in the wide receiver class? And which two players do you have straddling that line? Well, I'll answer the second part of that question because I went back and looked. I thought I had Devin Duvernay in the top 100. I have him at 101. So he's right there. I could see him in the third round. I could see him in the fourth round. So Duvernay was one. And I'll give you another guy, Juwan Johnson. I think he goes day 3. I think round 4, round 5. He's going to be a starter at the next level. And John, I think we talked about the depth here, 17 guys in our top 100. 55 guys at the combine. I do believe day 3, you're going to see some starting wide receivers get selected here.
Yeah, and then we've always seen that's been one of the positions that you can routinely look back in almost any draft and see guys in the 5th, 6th, 7th round. And we know about the guys that have gone undrafted who have gone on to play and start in the NFL. But hey, look at Isaiah. Look at a guy like Rhode Island's Isaiah Coulter. Here's a perfect guy that in another season or in another year probably would be talked about in a way different range, of pick, but in all likelihood is more of a mid-round guy that, tests as well as, a lot of the guys from the bigger schools. Production-wise, it's there, but in all likelihood is not looking at getting selected where you would normally hear that kind of outlier guy from a lesser school. Where does that take a guy like him? Where does it take the kid from Liberty? That's another guy that's popped up, and his name kind of circulates around, and you see a wide range, of where people think he might go. So I think again, it's the teams that have a very big need for it. And are you going to see again? We mentioned it yesterday. If a team is making a trade up and it's for a wide receiver, is it specifically for the guys that we've heard? Well, it's got to be either Judy or Lamb. And then when the trade happens, it's neither, right? And I think that's going to be the real interesting part, of the first round is some of the moves that are made may not be for the players that people have expected to hear, and that could cause a shuffle anywhere from when Bob Quinn starts the draft at pick 3, all the way down to pick 32 of the first round. There's going to be a lot of interesting scenarios that go on there with it in terms of not only who gets picked, but when you hear a certain position, you're going to expect a certain name, and it might be a wild card.
Yeah, and Isaiah Coulter, the Rhode Island wide receiver, is a guy, quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if he went round 1, and I wouldn't be surprised if he went round 4, Ryan. Where do you kind of see the break-off here in terms of being able to find starting caliber wide receivers, whether it's on the outside or the inside?
It's a really loaded question because, we see the talent in the first round with the Judys, the Ruggs, the Lambs. Those guys are kind of that first-tier wide receiver. I think that the meat and potatoes of this group, though, is that day 2, that second and third round options. There's a lot of incredibly talented guys. I look as an Isaiah Coulter in that range, probably somewhere in the third round. I'm a big fan of him. I think the big question, and John went into it a little bit with like Antonio Gandy Golden, it's the big wide receivers. I think that's kind of where the separator begins. I think those are the guys that might slip into early day 3 just because, are they quote unquote dynamic? Maybe not, but they're good possession receivers. I think of Colin Johnson from Texas. I think of Isaiah Hodgins from Oregon State, the big body wide receivers that some people might not value that style as highly as they have in the past. I think, even in that situation, though, those guys are still potential starting caliber wide receivers at some point. But I think that what I'm most interested in is seeing where those big body pass catchers ultimately end up in this draft.
Yeah, Antonio Gandy Golden there. I got a chance to see him against Rutgers. It was like going to Barnum and Bailey Circus, the acrobatic catches he was making, and over here, this and that. Joe, I found it interesting. I saw where somebody broke down, I think over the past 5 or 10 years, they took the average production of second-round receivers and the average production of first-round, and the second-round wide receivers outproduced the first-round guys by far. How much will you see of that in this year's draft, and how are you viewing it? Because to me, it's like I look at the Buffalo Bills trade, and it's like, okay, great, we got Stephon Diggs. He's a sure thing. But we had to give up additional picks. Like they could have probably had a more cost-effective quality player receiver, but the draft is so much of a question mark. Stephon Diggs, a proven commodity, wide receiver, first-round bust factor, but then wide receiver also value pick in the mid-rounds. Break it all down for the people, Joe.
Yeah, I think I saw the same thing. I want to say that was on the Peter King, but I've got the break-off in round 4 or 5, really. That's how chock full this receiver class is. And if I had to give the particulars on the guys, it'd be the end of it's probably guys like Michael Pittman, Austin Mack in my round 5. And then after that, I think that's where the breakoff is, where you're going to have to project guys. Colin Johnson in the 6th round, Marquez Callaway, where he fits in. And to Ryan's point, it's like, when these large-bodied wide receivers that are they dynamic or explosive, that's when that delineation hits, and will they be penalized for that as they have been in years past? But on the point of that article, though, I kind of agree too. It's just the second round, day 2, has become so much more important for these players that I think are being taken more so on the token of this question. Are they going to be a likely NFL starter? Can I count on them? And how do they fit on my team? So I think the breakoff, clearly what the question's kind of getting at is how much talent there is and through how many rounds will we see a likely starter. And to me, I usually have it in that breakoff between round 3 and 4. This year, I'm wanting to say it's between 4 and 5, and maybe if not the entirety of the round 5 receivers. I think the talent in this group is that great.
And then, as you're talking, you say Michael Pittman round 5, day 3. I could go ask somebody else. They might say Michael Pittman round 1. And I think that goes to show not only the depth of this year's class, but also the varying opinions that we are going to see come this draft and the different things that are going on. Now, I heard a ring-a-ding-ding. Dakota, do we have a guest here going on? What's happening? Ryan, any other questions coming in from the chat room? It's rapid fire here, NFL Draft Bible Live on your TV screen in the Zoom. Okay, we're all good.
I don't know what that was.
Okay, all good. So, all right. So, we're just hours away here. It's literally 2 days away from the NFL draft. John, first, let me get your opinion on Michael Pittman, because I think that's a guy that's all over the map. And then also, what else is on your mind? Just 2 days away. Take us inside. You're obviously getting ready for the CFL draft. Take us inside the NFL draft war rooms. What are teams doing here 48 hours or 54 hours away from the draft?
I think a lot of times it's the guys that are in different groups, and like you're mentioning, if you have a kid like Pittman and he is your outside guy saying, hey, if we're going to pass on the first round, who's the best of our guys that we see left over, right? Another thing that you're trying to do when you're, a team like Miami, or, if you have multiple selections, I think sometimes you got to work kind of backwards, forwards, and say like, hey, what guys do we expect to be here in the 20s? Okay. And then who's going to be here in the middle? And if that leads you to, well, we're for sure taking a quarterback, here at 5, if you're still trying to get out of there with a quarterback, an offensive tackle, and what your primary third need would be, sometimes you have to kind of play around with it in order to make sure you get your best, combination of those two picks. And I think that's why you're hearing, a little bit of Carolina trying to make it be that, hey, maybe we're available, right? If somebody wants to make a trade and your top 5 guy is still available, like, hey, don't worry, kind of throw us a call. We're not just locked into making a pick. It was John Lynch made it very obvious, to almost kind of just put it on social media like, hey, here's where I'll be taking phone calls about our pick. That's a different way to do things, but certainly, there's one way to be very obvious about it, and then I think, going back to what we've said, there's not that ebb and flow of all the information that normally is kind of just circling around. You normally have a little better idea of, who is that guy, right now it seems to be CJ Henderson is kind of taking that title, midway through, heading midway into the week, where he's the outlier, right? It now seems like he might be the guy that not only gets picked much earlier than people expected, but possibly even number 1 at his position when he's clearly not been the number 1 guy the entire time. So I think a lot of that will cause a lot of interesting shuffling around. And it also makes me wonder that at the last minute, when normally most of the people that are going to be, with their information live, in front of the screen, kind of temper down and kind of just leave it the way they've had it the whole time. I think we'll see a lot of people changing Detroit's pick, Jacksonville's pick, Carolina's pick. Even we mentioned yesterday, the Saints, where you've just locked in at a certain position or a certain player on a team. I think not getting enough information to make you feel comfortable with it is going to make a lot of shuffling of people's last mock draft.
And if you haven't done your final mock draft, to throw another monkey wrench into it, Joe, this morning now you're hearing that the Redskins are entertaining picks at number 2. And to John's point, I thought Chase Young was slam dunk, sign, seal, deliver. Like, is there any questions to even think about this? So at what price, Joe, is it worth Washington and maybe the Redskins see Detroit saying, hey, Detroit's in 3, they're possibly in line to get all of Miami's first-round picks to move up to 3. Hey, maybe we should put our number 2 pick on the board and see what comes in. At what price, though, do you pass on a talent like Chase Young, arguably the top player in the draft?
Yes, the mathematical equation would be Chase Young equals 3 first-rounders right now. In that respect, you want to go get Chase, or do you want that other quarterback? Miami, those are appetizing. But, I think minimum you'd have to, in this year's class, get 2 high first-rounders with some spare change. And then if you're going into futures, you do want the 3. But, yeah, Miami owes it to themselves Washington owes it to themselves to do the business at least. Entertain the offers. I'm still thinking at the end of the day that's got to be Chase. He's from Washington area. The fits with the Ohio State crew on the team, it just seemed, like you said, such a natural glove meet hand kind of scenario. But credit to Danny Snyder. I guess it's always Thanksgiving in Washington D.C.
Ryan, Nick Saban came out yesterday and proclaimed passing up Tua would be the equivalent of passing up on Drew Brees. something he was talked out of during his head coach at the Dolphins to go with Dante Culpepper. So maybe a dig at the Dolphins simultaneously while praising Tua. We saw a couple years ago Dabo Swinney take the same kind of stance with Deshaun Watson, saying, hey, it's the equivalent of passing up on Michael Jordan. I don't think he was too far off the way Watson has played. At the same time, if you're the Redskins, what's the price of doing business? What's Chase Young worth to you? Is it 2 first-round picks, 3 first-round picks? At what point do you say, okay, I'll stockpile the talent and give up the best player in the draft?
I mean, I personally would just stay packed and take Chase Young. I wouldn't even really consider it too much. But if I had to make the price, Miami is obviously the team I'd be calling and say 2 first-round picks, next year's first-round pick, maybe throw in a third this year. I'm going for the full bank here. Because when we look at it, in a vacuum, Chase Young is the best player in this draft. I feel like that's pretty consensus across the board. You want the best player in the draft, you have to give up the farm for him.
I agree. I think even the Raiders, if the Raiders came calling with 12 and 19, I'd have to turn it down because the 2 players I'm going to get at 12 and 19 are not going to equate to the impact that a Chase Young can have. All right. We've got Ryan Roberts, Joe Everett, John Murphy, Rick Sarasella here. We're going to go over to the chat room, answer some more of your questions. We got one coming in here, Joe. Comparison for Jalen Reagor and Henry Ruggs. What do you got there for us?
For Henry Ruggs, that's tough, man. That's one of my favorite prospects I've seen in quite some time. So I'm saying the physical talent and body of Deshaun Jackson with the spirit animal of Terry McLaurin. I think that's what his game is. He plays special teams. He tackles people from behind, and the competitive streak in him runs red hot. And then also he's got the physical abilities that you would just kill for. So I think Reagor, that's a tough one, man. He's stocky. He's also got that track speed, got to have it. Man, yeah, I'm almost at a loss for Reagor. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't studied his game nearly enough to give him a proper comp.
Maybe a Devontae Adams, and then I could see Ruggs having a kind of impact like a Tyreek Hill, John, if he gets with the right strong-armed quarterback. Mahomes just throws it up there. Hey, Tyreek, go get that thing. And I keep saying the Broncos, like, hey, Drew Lock, just throw that thing down there and let Henry Ruggs go chase it. Any comps come to mind with Reagor or Ruggs?
Yeah, I think those guys, I think where and how they would be used is kind of going to be along the lines of like Fuller or Cooks. You'd hope that their health might be a little bit better than, with what those guys have had. But, you look at what those guys can do and how quickly guys like Fuller and Cooks were able to use that vertical, prowess that they have to make an instant impact on their team. I think the teams that would be making a move to grab, those 2 players, that would be what they would expect the instant impact to be, is kind of blowing the top off, the secondary, being able to get deep and then make the play, and that's something that Cooks did, pretty much from the jump day one. And the same thing, every time Fuller is in the game, he's averaging, 15, 18, 20 plus yards a catch. It's just keeping him healthy and on the field. So, I think the other thing that you've definitely seen out of Reagor is the added value as a returner, is something that could help get him on the field early. That would be something that, you could see somebody take advantage of. But I think we're right in the ballpark, right? Deshaun Jackson, the initial thing was the high yards per catch, the big plays down the field. It's the rest of their game that'll determine if taking them in the first round was the right thing to do, will be them becoming more than that.
Ryan, Henry Ruggs, is he Deshaun Jackson or is he John Ross? Jalen Reagor, is he maybe a Packers fit to replace Devontae Adams there type of role? Where do you see these guys?
I struggle with the Ruggs comp. It's a tough one. I wanted to stylistically say, to go along with Joe's comment about the toughness, there's a little bit of Steve Smith Sr., a little bit in there. It's not a direct comparison because their body types are different. I do have a good one, though, for Rieger, I think. When I was watching him, I thought I was seeing Joey Galloway, who was a really good receiver for the Cowboys, for the Buccaneers. Had that vertical element, but then he was also, packed together pretty well. I felt like he could do some stuff, after catch, that type of thing. But so I like the Rieger to Galloway comparison. Ruggs, I think, is just a really tough one to find one for.
Going in the Wayback Machine with Joey Galloway, and I like it. All right, next question. Does Jacob Eason belong more on the Buccaneers or in the 90s? Another U.S. pocket passing quarterback, Joe. I know you I think, mentioned yesterday you see him in the first round here, so we'll throw that one over to you, my man.
Can it be both? How about the Buccaneers of the 90s? No, actually, more appropriately, the Buccaneers in the late 70s, early 80s. Give me some creamsicle Jacob Eason, and I'm in heaven. But no, I think getting to the statuesque quarterback, that might be his label and one of the knocks potentially on his game. But I don't know. I still think he's got some surprising athleticism there. Maybe a decade out or something, but it's not nearly as bad as being like Leonard Fournette and, supposed to be in 1980 football when it's 2020.
Yeah. Vinny might have something to say about this, but Ryan, now that I think about it here, Tampa Bay might not be a bad fit for him and sit behind another statuesque quarterback in Tom Brady, similar style.
Yeah, I love the fit. I mean, even from a schematic perspective, Bruce Arians' vertical-based offense, Jacob Eason fits that to a T. I mean, he has a strong arm. He is very good at changing arm speeds. He throws in beautiful ball. I love the fit just overall. Sitting behind Tom Brady for a year probably be a great idea, maybe two. We'll see what happens with that, but definitely like the fit. It's obviously a little poke at fun. That he's kind of an ancient kind of fit, but that style could still fit. It's a funny joke or whatever, but I think Tampa Bay would be a really nice fit. Sitting behind Brady for a year or two, and then being paired with Bruce Arians sounds like a really nice combination for me.
John, I heard that, once the teams are allowed to do physicals, Joe Flacco is a guy after the draft that might sign here soon. He said he's willing to accept the backup role. Are we moving away from these stand in the pocket passing quarterbacks, or is there still a lifeline? Is there still a window for these guys to be successful in the NFL? Because more and more, the quarterbacks coming into the league have the ability to move around, buy time in the pocket, and do all those things. Guys like Joe Flacco and Jacob Eason, not so much. Is there a future for a Jacob Eason who might need a year or two to develop?
Yeah, I think you would probably look at the teams that have somebody on, that's there, whether it's the OC or the quarterback coach or, somebody in the front office where it'll make sense where he ends up, right? He's not going to be for everybody, but where he does end up is probably going to be a naturally good fit, for him. And we mentioned a couple of them. You could also see, hey, if it's not a first round guy because they've doubled down, and signed Mariota, is that the kind of guy with that arm, that, a guy like Gruden would get fond of, and want to get his hands on. You mentioned Tampa Bay. That's another good, location, for him to take the time, to develop him, if you're playing that style already or stylistically, you want that vertical passing game, he would, then fit, that kind of model, of things. Would the Colts look at, somebody to have behind both, Rivers and Brissett, because he's not going to be there long-term, and Brissett probably is not going to be there long-term either. So I think you could see teams that have preferred the vertical passing game, or maybe play in conditions where, they feel like, having the arm strength, is a big deal. But little by little, we've kind of moved away, right? First was, arm strength isn't everything. And then, teams got away from, even saying, the gun, is not a big deal. If they don't have a strong enough arm to make all the throws, they just need to make the throws we're looking for, in our, specific offense. Now we've gotten to the moving pocket and guys that they want the athleticism to kind of keep the play, alive longer with, the, against the, the pass rush that is coming in the NFL. So I think, there's still room for guys like him, but it's going to be more of a specific fit that when you hear his name, you'll think immediately, okay, this is why it makes sense. Or after the draft, when you hear the team that selects him, the person speaking will give you the idea of why they were so high on him.
You know, as we're talking about quarterbacks here, I'm going to pose an interesting question, and I'll come back to you guys so you can think about it. But I'm going to come back and ask you guys, let's take Tua and Herbert and Burrow out of the equation. But if you're an NFL team, you have a shot in the back end of the first round, and you can draft Jordan Love, Jacob Eason, Jalen Hurts, whoever you want after those big three, or you can sign Cam Newton, Jameis Winston, or Joe Flacco. I'm going to ask you who the best available quarterback is after Burrow, Tua, and Herbert. I'm going to come back to you to that question in just a second. First, over to our next question coming in from Twitter. Why doesn't Draft Twitter, Ryan, know about the Javin Whites, the L'Jarius Sneeds, Kenny Robinson, and Vincent Calhouns of the world? What's going on? Why doesn't Draft Twitter? Why are they living in the closet, brother?
Good, because they all clamor to the popular names, so they don't take a look at these guys until they're getting to the combine and blowing stuff up. You know, I feel like Reggie Robinson from Tulsa kind of fits that billing as well. You know, guys that you didn't know much about, but then they make you pay attention to them. You think of that with Sneed. Javin White just tested great. He's kind of that, you know, similar stylistically to how we're viewing Jeremy Chin. Like, he could play some too high. He could play down in the box. He could play on tight ends, do all types of stuff, safety, linebacker, hybrid. And then Vincent Calhoun hasn't gotten much buzz. I like him a little bit from Eastern Michigan. I feel like he's kind of, you know, a late day 3, maybe undrafted free agent that could do some stuff on special teams. And then the last guy was Kenny Robinson. I mean, we don't talk much about him because he's an interesting story amongst himself. You know, he's a West Virginia kid, had a really nice 2018 year as a sophomore, was academically ineligible going into 2019. So he ended up dropping out of school, going to the XFL, and, getting a paycheck, which I don't blame him personally. And, he's a very interesting player. So I just feel like some people, just clamor to the same names over and over again, the popular names. And when you do research, though, obviously you're going to end up finding these hidden gems, and they're going to go a lot higher than some people think. And, I feel like a lot of people now are just trying to get their watching in on them late here in the process because they didn't know much about them to begin with.
Joe, we began the NFL Draft Bible in 2002. We're still standing in 2020. And I think a big reason is because of our ability to identify these day 3 guys, these undrafted free agent players that go under the radar. And it's a big reason, it's a backbone as to why we're still standing here almost 2 decades later, because amazingly, we're still one of the very few media outlets. Mainstream media ain't reporting on these guys. We're one of the very few people that actually give these guys the time. Why is it that Draft Twitter rolls over and doesn't want to talk about these guys?
Well, I think just like Ryan said, they're not the mainstream players. They're not day one folks that, have all the pub. I mean, I think it's Robinson put out a letter to all the GMs himself. He already played some XFL. I commend him for being the do-it-yourself type. And I think also just, not to break my arm, patting ourselves on the back, but we go out and talk to these kids directly. We just talked to Sneed. Today, the guest will be Javin White, who just refreshing on him. What a player. I mean, I'm looking forward to talking to him because just in interviews, that is one composed, professional individual. And then you put on the tape and, man, he's a mother. He just is all over it. And we're battling it out, you and I, Rick, on that top 100. It's like I'm running out of excuses why not to put this man in the top 100 players. So, we're big fans of White. I'm a huge supporter of Sneed. And, Robinson, I like. Calhoun, I have not. I'll fess up. I have not investigated enough of him. So, in light of that question, you gave me some homework out there, a chat user.
Yeah, digging in the crates in safety. And, John, one thing I know from doing this so long is that, hey, Draft Twitter, I'm not seeing them too much on the scouting trails. People don't realize as much as it's valuable to have a keen eye for talent, it's also just as valuable to know who to listen to, because, I mean, we've got our database for next year, for example, 6,000 players. There's no way humanly possible that one person can scour through all these individuals. So, we narrowed it down to 622 scouting reports in the draft Bible this year. But to get from 6,000 to 600, you got to get by with a little help from your friends, no?
Yeah, no doubt. And I think the other thing is, what these kids don't always know is, hey, that junior pro, that first 40 that you're going to run is going to either put you on the map, to a lot of different people, right? It's going to put you on the map because the area scout's going to come back and watch you. It's going to put you on the map because suddenly, you're going to have a bunch of people, calling you that weren't calling you before if it's really good. And I think the other thing is everybody gets so intrigued by that first name or that first player that comes with a school that's not, one they've ever heard of. So unfortunately, I think for some of these guys, for every Southern Illinois and Lenoir-Rhyne and, Eastern Kentucky and whatever guy that you get, it puts those other guys kind of in the back burner on the minds of people who are not doing this all year round, right? There's room for those guys and there's room for these other kids for us to watch all of them, because then you're looking for another one like him to say, okay, hey, if that guy now might go in the first, second, third round, okay, now who's the mid-round, kind of dark horse guy, or who's the late round kind of dark horse guy? Whereas I think, the guys that are only covering the draft for a 30 or 60-day window, they're going to get so caught up in Jeremy Chin and Kyle Duger, and guys like that they're never going to look past those guys. So it's great for those kids because they've jumped to the forefront, but I think it takes up most of the time, of the people that are only doing this for a very short period of time, that they're trying to encapsulate not thousands of kids to hundreds of kids. They're trying to take hundreds of kids and narrow it down to literally 30 to 50 of them that they need to know for the night of the draft.
And I think
sorry, Rick, I was just going to say it's also kind of, you also have to think about, it's not the easiest thing in the world to get Eastern Michigan and UNLV defensive film. You know what I mean? So it's tough for just the average person on a daily basis to find some UNLV, pop on Javen White, and just get a real clear picture of how he might potentially fit.
Yeah, and I think another part of that equation too is, let's be honest, January 15th is the underclassmen deadline. You've literally got now 3 months to get caught up on 150 guys that just declared. And, I thought we did a great job being prepared for the big wave of underclassmen, having those scouting reports ahead of time. But there's always going to be the Amik Robertsons of the world that it's like, oh, I didn't know he was declaring. The Monmouth running back is declaring for the draft. Well, heck, I went to Monmouth. I didn't know I was looking at a prospect. Well, let me write him up now. So I think, it's continuous catch up. Once January hits, the people that don't follow this all year long are just kind of playing catch up, leading up to the draft. And I can tell you, doing this 365 days a year, it's a never-ending game of catch up. You're never caught up. Go ask my wife. Rick Saratella, Ryan Roberts, Joe Everett, John Murphy here. Open roundtable discussion going on. Speaking of safeties, Ryan, we have a good one coming up that's also hasn't been talked about. And speaking of a junior who went into Temple, I did not know Harrison Hand was going to declare for the draft. So perfect example, not a Power 5 conference guy, declares in January, so really wasn't heavily on the radar. We're going to have him coming up in a few minutes here. So what can you tell us about Harrison Hand?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting one. Actually, he's a New Jersey guy, and he grew up in Cherry Hill. I grew up in Cherry Hill for a while too, so I was really familiar with him coming out. He was originally committed to Virginia Tech. He ended up going to Baylor for a couple years. Once their defensive back coach came up to Temple, he decided to transfer for his junior year at Temple, was granted immediate eligibility, came back home, and he played corner most of the time. But when you watch the film on this guy, on Harrison, he is a physical defensive back. I would never throw a screen on this kid ever. He is physical. He gets up there. He has great eyes. I don't think he's the smoothest transitional athlete in the world. That's why I really think that his best home eventually is going to be as a nickel or as a safety, playing some man-to-man coverage on the slot, being able to use that physicality. I think he has a lot of potential. I'm really excited about him. And then he went to the combine. He ran like 4.5 flat, and he at like 200 pounds, 6 foot. And then he had like a 41-inch vertical or some crazy number too. So he's a really explosive athlete, physical. I think his best spot's inside eventually, but, very interesting story. I had the opportunity for NFL Draft Bible to sit down with him a few weeks ago. Really well-spoken guy, interesting journey, and I'm excited that he was just able to come on today. I think it's going to be a really great interview.
Yeah, no, we're looking forward to that, and a guy I'm excited to talk to. We're going to have 2 Temple guys. Dakota, maybe we can send that Sean Bradley link invite a little bit early to Sean and have some Harrison Hand, Sean Bradley crossover. We didn't even plan it that way. We get them to ask each other a question or get somebody to spill some information on each other here at the NFL Draft Bible live stream. Hey, at 11 o'clock, we'll have Hollywood Squares edition. Dane Vandernat, Von Hutchins joining us in with a slew of player guests coming on. So make sure you stay tuned for that. We've got some more questions coming in from the chat room. Where do you think Tua will end up? Well, we dove into this very in-depth on yesterday's show. So on the All Access Football YouTube network, you can go back, watch the show if you want a more in-depth elaboration here. But I am the outliner here. I think these 3 men all have the Chargers getting to it, while I have the Dolphins getting to it. Has anybody changed their mind in the last 24 hours? Everybody's a Charger? Nope. Okay. So Tua in that new Charger uniform. You guys feeling the uniforms yet or not really? So yeah, for that question, I don't want to repeat ourselves and go into that too much again. We've got another one here. Which player who many expect to go high will fall farther than expected? Grant Delpit has been a big name where I'm not even sure if he's expected to go in the first round at this point. I'm not sure if anybody expects him to go in the first round at this point. So I'm not sure if that's going to be a big surprise to anybody. But John, anybody that you're seeing here being mocked into the first round that you're just kind of scratching your head saying, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I could see we brought up, Cesar Ruiz yesterday, to Dallas and even Kansas City, at a couple of times, you could see a interior lineman, kind of jump in. And if there's one, that would make me interesting to see if Dallas were to slide back, which they're prone to do, and take a Ruiz, in the 20s, would that then mean, Cushenberry could jump his way in and all of a sudden you got 2 interior linemen, that go in the top 32, or we end up with 0. And I think the other one is, and it's followed up, I think I see another one coming in question, after this. The other one is how many of these tackles, if there's a run on them in the middle, team, how many guys end up going, right? I think Josh Jones is going to get not overdrafted, but drafted higher on draft day than where he is presumed right now. Does that mean it's because someone else has fallen? Not necessarily. But then I could also see guys like Ezra Cleveland, Austin Jack. I can see those guys getting picked late because of teams either maneuvering around up or down, or because the run on them just gets to the point where people don't have the patience to wait for the second round. They're going to push the receivers, possibly running back, even some of the in-between pass rusher guys that may not have the testing times that people really wanted to see out of them. I could see some of those guys kind of falling and being there in the second round where we projected those guys to go. And now all of a sudden, here's 1 or 2 interior O linemen that are in the first round.
Joe, let's combine both of these questions because they do intertwine here. And if you have a question on Twitter at NFL Draft Bible, or you can drop a question in the comment section on YouTube here, Dakota will get them to us. But which player do you expect to fall that people are kind of anticipating? And then also the second question is specifically T. Higgins, Austin Jackson, and Josh Jones. Are any of those guys first round picks, or do they all fall into round 2?
To me personally, I've never had T. Higgins as a first rounder. I do not understand the allure that some people bringing it up. But I mean, not that he's a bad player. I just think you could get a receiver like that. The fellas we brought up earlier on the wide receiver conversation, Josh Jones is a first rounder. I think that's of those three. But they took the words right out. It's kind of a great question, I think, because Austin Jackson's a player I'm seeing. I don't think he is a first rounder, and much to the point John was making, it's just there's only so many of these tackles that we can fit before we're running out of space. The Cleveland kid from Boise might butt his way into the back half of the first round, but how good was USC last year? I saw a lot of quarterbacks on their back. You ask JT Daniels, he's not too appreciative of the pass blocking. I mean, I don't see how Austin Jackson gets in the first. Not that he's a bad player, but there's a lot of names to be siphoned in, and that's where I would agree the tackle position may be getting the raw deal there in some respects. But yeah, I see Jackson as the day 2 player that does well for himself. And T. Higgins, I'm just seeing like a lesser version of Mike Williams, the Clemson receiver. Maybe hey, T. Higgins, prove me wrong.
Yeah, unfortunately for T, I don't know if he falls down to the 6th round, but I could see him kind of slide. Like Kelvin Harmon people thought he was a first-round pick last year, and he winded up going round 6. T. Higgins, I could see, maybe going day 3, possibly. Ryan, I had a chance to see both Austin Jackson live and then Josh Jones down at the Senior Bowl. I will say, I think Josh Jones, if you want the more polished, immediate impact kind of plug and play tackle, Josh Jones is your guy. I went into USC trying to say, hey, what's all this buzz about Austin Jackson? I get it from the frame. This guy's best football is ahead of him. I can only imagine with the year of an NFL strength and conditioning program how much bigger this guy's going to get. So I get the raw athleticism, and coach is going to want to really mold this guy. Where do you see Higgins and then Jackson versus Josh Jones, and then also any other guys that you could see sliding in the first round that people are expecting or anticipating to go high in the draft?
Yeah, I think that Josh Jones is going to be a first rounder. I have him as my 5th ranked offensive tackle after the big 4. I think he has all the tools. He's got some really light feet on him. I think that he's the clear-cut guy that I think is, I mean, again, we don't want to talk in absolutes, but I would be willing to bet that he is the guy that's going to be in there. Austin Jackson, it's an interesting conversation because there's something with right before the season he donated bone marrow. So he's been on record to say that he just was not himself the whole year, zapped of energy constantly. So it's something to consider. I mean, if we're just watching the film, though, I was not a big fan of his film. I think that he might potentially get into the first round conversation just because you see the tools. A good offensive line coach is going to be able to talk themselves into him pretty easy, I think. And I'm on the same wavelength as Joe here. I cannot, talk about this enough. I have not been on the T. Higgins hype train for the entire evaluation process. I don't get the appeal. I don't see where he creates separation except for in the air, and then he goes to his pro day and he has like a 31-inch vert. Like, how translatable is that trait to the next level? I don't see that one. If I had to throw out one guy that I think is kind of like, so I put a first round grade on him. I like him a bunch, but one guy that I'm not hearing any buzz on much, just around the draft community, but you see him pretty consistently in mock drafts in the first, is Christian Fulton from LSU, the corner. I feel he's a very solid football player. I think that he might be just losing some of that buzz here. Even though he tested relatively well at the combine, he had, a good 2 years of tape. 2018 was a little better than 2019, but still a good year of tape in 2019. I just feel like there's not a lot of buzz on him for whatever reason. So he's a guy that I think might end up sliding to second round somewhere, but a guy that you're going to get tremendous value on for sure.
Good point. I want to get in our next 2 questions quickly because Dane and Vaughn are going to be joining us here along with Harrison Hand. So will Ruggs slide because he isn't considered a wide receiver 1? No, he will not slide because teams still value and crave speed. So there's no way he slides out of round 1. Talk about second and third tier quarterbacks. I'm going to rephrase this question because I think after Burrow, Tua, and Herbert, I think that next wave is Jordan Love is kind of in the second wave by himself, and then I think it's Hurts and Easton. I'll phrase it in a different way. After those top six, I think that's our consensus top six. Who's the next guy for you? For me, it's James Morgan from FIU. I had a chance to study him last summer. Just very impressed. Not so much impressed with his film this year, but I thought he recuperated some of his draft stock at the combine. He's now in our top 100. I see round 3 for James Morgan. John, is there a quarterback here that we're not talking about that you like?
Well, I can still see somebody taking from higher than where it's been said, in recent times. I think he's a lot safer than some of these other guys, in terms of how teams will evaluate him. The arm and all that stuff will not excite the way that Easton's does. He doesn't have, Hurts's mobility. He doesn't have any real wow factor. And then somebody who just runs an offense and wants it run a certain way with a certain degree of success rate. We'll see him as being a high completion percentage guy that can run their scheme. And I still can see him getting taken higher, than some of the other guys we mentioned. I think Morgan's a good case in point, for a guy that it seems like, teams are saying if they are looking for a developmental guy, he might be, the next guy on, kind of on that radar. I think he definitely, fits that mold.
All right, Dakota, let's cue up the promo. In the meantime, we're going to reset here. We're going to welcome in Dane Vandernat and Von Hutchins to the show. We've got Harrison Hand coming up in just a few minutes. I see Dane on the line now, so let's welcome him in. He is the director of college recruiting at the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl, someone who I've got a chance to work with this past season. He joins us now on the show. Dane, say hello to the people out there.
What's going on, fellas? How we all doing today?
Doing good, man. Having a
John, how are those meetings going, man? You got the coaches primed up for later today still?
Johnny, he's talking to you, brother.
Oh yeah, they're good. I gave them till Wednesday to kind of get their stuff in order from last week. I'm not sure why Russ and them are having multiple meetings. They have the first pick. Just tell us who you're taking.
Yeah. We got NFL Draft Bible live stream. The CFL meeting's got to be placed on hold. Von Hutchins joining us now down there.
Right, priorities.
Von, how we doing today, brother?
I'm good. What's up, fellas? What's happening?
What's going on, my man? Listen.
What's up, Von?
We appreciate you joining us here on day 2 of our NFL Draft Hollywood Squares edition. We're going to take a quick 1-minute break. Dakota's going to roll the promo, and then we're going to welcome in Harrison Hand and our whole wave of players today. Don't go anywhere. Dakota, you ready, brother?
Yes, sir.
All right, hit it, my man.
It's back, the official 2020 NFL Draft Bible, bringing you the names you need to know first since 2002 with insider access to players, scouts, coaches, and the entire draft industry. The 2020 NFL Draft Bible is available now both in PDF or book versions, featuring over 600 in-depth scouting reports, more than 175 player interviews, official combine and pro day measurements, plus our 2021 draft preview and mock draft. The NFL Draft Bible is the official scouting service provider of the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl and is used by all 32 NFL teams. Log on to NFLDraftBible.com and get your copy today.
Hey, we're back at it again. Can't stop, won't stop kind of day here. Can't stop, won't stop kind of week. Can't stop, won't stop kind of year. We're just 2 hours away from this 2020 NFL draft. Supposedly was going to be in Las Vegas, and instead we're going to get the virtuoso effect here for the 2020 NFL draft. Of course, next year being held in Cleveland, and then 2023 in Kansas City. So I have a feeling 2022 might circle back to Las Vegas. Rick Saratella, John Murphy, Ryan Roberts, Joe Everett, Dane Vandernat, and Von Hutchins all here on the Hollywood Squares edition. We're waiting for Harrison Hand, I believe, still. Dakota, I'm seeing the promo freeze up. Are we still waiting on Harrison, or do we have him? We're still waiting. Okay.
Yeah, we're still waiting on him.
Very good. So, Ryan gave us a great breakdown on Harrison Hand just a little while ago. We've got another Temple tough guy following him, Dane, and Sean Bradley. And as you know, I've been a big fan of Sean Bradley. I said, man, we got to get this guy over to Pasadena. And I think you saw firsthand, this guy was just an alpha dog. I love the fact that his mouth runs just as fast as his feet. And he's just a nonstop, high-energy, infectious kind of player.
Yeah, man, he's got that New Jersey in him, man. He's got that Temple tough to him. You know, I think we all saw those attributes show up in Pasadena for the NFLPA Bowl when he was out there. You just love his range, the enthusiasm with which he plays, and you always want to see guys flying around. If you're a linebacker playing on Sundays, you're going to be asked to process a lot of information, and teams want to see you react quickly. We don't want you overthinking and getting paralysis via analysis. We want you flying around, putting a hat on somebody, and hopefully creating turnovers. And that's exactly what Sean Bradley's been about. And I'm excited to see, you know, one, to talk with him today here, but also to see where he's going to end up going this weekend.
Yeah, and Vaughn, you know, when Bradley got out there, it was like, you know, I came into the week of Pasadena saying, you know, this is one of my guys. I feel really strongly about him being one of the better players in attendance. And, you know, I know he didn't do anything to hurt his stock. In fact, I would say he helped his stock.
Absolutely. Anytime you got a linebacker that's able to play three downs, a guy that's able to play in coverage, a guy that's able to blitz and pressure the quarterback, a guy that's able to defend in the run, a guy that's able to play strong against blocks, you got a guy that can play and be productive on Sundays. So it was good to see him out there in Pasadena. It was good to see him perform well during the week of practice, be receptive, and continue to learn throughout the week, and then perform well during the game.
And, you know, we got a question coming in from the chat room talking about tier 3 quarterbacks. Who are some of those day 3 guys that are kind of under the radar who could produce at the next level? I'm going to go back over to Dane for this one because we had Nick Tiano. In fact, Vaughn turned to me right before kickoff. He goes, who's your pick for MVP? I said, Nick Tiano. And what did you know? Lo and behold, I mean, he came out chucking that ball down the field. He had a big pass over Damon Hayes. I forget the receiver he hit. But Nick Tiano, to me, Dane, really proved his weight and raised some eyebrows and turned some heads out there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking again with Nick here, you know, here in a little bit. But, you know, the thing that most impressed me about Nick was his presence out there. You know, I thought that he came there. He looked like an NFL quarterback. He carried himself like an NFL quarterback. And we all know that, hey, going from a spread offense in college where everyone's looking at the sideline, get the signal for what their, you know, play responsibility is, as opposed to making that transition to the league where, hey, now you got to get into a huddle and talk to 10 grown men who may be a 15-year veteran lining up next to you. You know, if it goes to the Rams, you know, you're going to have Andrew Whitlock over there giving you some instructions. But, you know, so it's one of those things. It's a difference. I thought Nick Tiano carried himself well. I think he's going to be a great steal later in the rounds in the draft, as do I with Brian Lewerke, who we talked to yesterday. And, you know, I think there are a number of guys, you know, out there that are going to vie for that position. You know, another one would be our underclassman from Hawaii, who I kind of liked watching run around a little bit, little unorthodox throwing style. But, hey, you know what? For a guy who's athletic, has some arm strength, and has started for 3 years out there, I think he's got some upside.
Well, you're not the only one on this panel here that has some love for Cole McDonald. We threw his name around a little bit yesterday before he came on the show. And, I like him. He's an intriguing mix of talent, and we'll see where he goes. Jake Luton from Oregon State, I think he was in the top 100 for Gil Brandt. So, hey, between Lewerke, Tiano, Luton, we could see a handful of guys from the NFLPA Bowl with their name called here on day 3. Ryan, I know you did a 4-part series on Nick Tiano. You spoke to Nick. You spoke to our guy, Steve Fairchild. I saw him open out. I was all excited. I knew he was going to come prepared mechanically. And then I think he spoke to his high school coach. Who else? The cafeteria worker. Who's talking to over here?
Yeah, I got to talk to Coach Fairchild, Warren McCarty, who is Warrior quarterback coach, And also got to talk to Craig Doman, his agent, and he's a guy that they have rave reviews around. He's, got all the size measurables, athleticism. I know he had a really nice showing at the NFLPA Bowl from all accounts from both quarterback coaches. He's a really sharp kid too. So he kind of understands where he fits in. He knows that he's not going to be a high draft pick. He knows he's going to be a late round pick, a flyer, maybe an undrafted free agent, but he's a worker. So, at the end of the day, he understands what his standing is. He understands what he has to do. So impressive interviews all the way around. Nick is a really well-spoken young man. I was really impressed by him. He was a really nice interview to have.
All right, I see Harrison Hand is having some technical difficulties. So, yeah, Dakota, if you get Harrison and Sean on at the same time, we'll do a double dose of Temple Puff interviews. That's fine. While we're waiting for Harrison, Vaughn, since we have you here, another question came in about mid to late round safety prospects who are sleepers or just have good value, in your opinion. Any safeties you want to throw out there to the people?
Oh, it's a couple late round safeties that have pretty good value. A couple of them we had in the game ourselves. The kid from Tennessee, Nigel Warrior, he has value. Obviously didn't get an invite to the combine, but the interceptions that he had in the SEC, being able to play the ball effectively, the corner versatility. Again, it shows up like we talked about with L'Jarius Sneed yesterday. That's good. Levonta Taylor is a name to kind of follow, and obviously he's a nickel type, but teams are going to look at him as a nickel free safety type player. So again, that versatility to play multiple positions, smart, fast, quick, tough, those traits show up consistently.
You mentioned Levonta, and Nigel Warrior was the first guy who came to mind. But then you mentioned Levonta Taylor. I want to go to John and pick his brain, because Levonta Taylor, John, is a guy, 5-star recruit coming out of high school, came out like a gangbuster there for Florida State, kind of got moved around, a lot of coaching transition and turnover. When you're in that war room trying to gauge the value of a player like that, obviously the pedigree's there. He's been bounced around through his college career, so maybe he didn't match the expectations. How do you weigh all that inside your war room?
I think the big thing is where he's at, right? Like where do I see that guy at today, and put less emphasis on everything that's happened in the past. I don't want to overemphasize, his pedigree or what people were thinking of him earlier in his career. I'd rather have the information right now, right? So speak to, his last position coach, find out from the guys that were playing with him, most recently, what kind of guy is he now, so that I have a better understanding of what we're probably getting, as opposed to be guessing, right? That's the worst case scenario for you on a guy, is to be guessing or thinking that you know something about him, and then it turns out to be the accuracy of that was based off of information that wasn't really the information that you should have been checking on. So I think, there's plenty of guys that have moved around, like that have bounced around, programs, or bounced around things with different coaching staffs or things, of that nature, who turn out, and still sort of have that in them, and don't find their feet and their legs in the NFL until a second or third, chance or opportunity. But there's other guys that, once you see the arrow kind of straightening out, or you see the curve, kind of flattening for them, and they've kind of moved in the right direction, it's kind of smooth sailing from there. So I think it's really, do you trust who you're getting your information from, and do you trust the source of where that information came from?
No doubt about it. It's Rick Saratella here with John Murphy, Ryan Roberts, Dane Vandernat, Joe Everett, Vaughn Hutchins, Dakota Follett on the 1 and 2s, the director here behind the scenes, waiting for Harrison Hand and Sean Bradley. Quickly back over to the chat room. We were discussing tier 3 quarterbacks. Dane brought up Cole McDonald. Joe, we touched base on him briefly yesterday. I know you're up late night watching those Hawaii games, doing the hula hoop over there. What's your thoughts and impressions on Cole McDonald?
And just got off of ESPN Hawaii not a few minutes ago.
Oh, good. They called me yesterday. I blew them up.
Bobby, I think that breakoff this year is really a kind of precipitous fall as far as that second tier to third tier quarterbacks. I've got just, my flavor is Fromm and Hurts as the last of that second tier, and then that's from third round, I think, on down to 5, 6. I mean, the guy that's just trying to butt his way into me is James Morgan, like we talked about. I really came away from the Shrine Bowl there this year. Day one of practice on into the game, like James Morgan's a player. He also has that just air about him, like Captain James Morgan. Excuse me, James, if you're out there listening, but I'm really a big fan of his game. But outside of that, it is Cole. But I think it's a big drop off from there. You're looking at the very end of day 3, and maybe Anthony Gordon fits in, but I like McDonald in the simple fact that I know he's got a lot of turnovers and mistakes, but you don't have to coach him to be aggressive. You don't have to coach him to go for the jugular. There's a lot of gunslinger to him, and I'd rather rein a guy in than prod him to go try and push the envelope, if you know what I mean. Like, that's what I do like about Cole. So I think that's a positive trait for him. And of those, the tier 3 of QBs, like, that's the guy I'm looking at late in the third day. I want to take a chance on McDonald.
I'm gonna have to call my guy Chris Martin over there at OTG Sports. Hey, you got to get my guy Joe on your marketing team. He just came up with an endorsement there for Captain James Morgan. So, hey, it's the NFL Draft Bible live stream show. We're getting into our second half of the show here, and it's player interview time. And our first guest is Sean Bradley. We talked about right before he came on the show, the Temple Tough linebacker here came out to Pasadena. We were lucky enough to have him out at the NFL PA Collegiate Bowl. He joins us right now. Sean, how's everything holding up through the pandemic? How's this last month or two been for you in terms of the preparation leading up to the draft?
Yeah, for sure. How y'all doing? The process has been kind of crazy, you know.
How y'all doing?
I feel like you miss out on good experience, you know, being able to visit the coaches and do private workouts and go to the facilities and things like that. But you also get to, you know, talk to coaches on the FaceTime and things like that. So it's been good, but, you know, stressful and anxious and a lot of anxiety a little bit.
Well, you're on the hot seat here with a bunch of scouts. We're going to go around the room. First up, Dane Vandermatt, our director there at the NFL PA Bowl. I'm going to fire off the first question for you.
Yeah, Sean, good to see you again, man. We were just talking about it, man. We said you had a great week out in Los Angeles for our game, man. But, you know, kind of tell us about it a little bit. Tell us about the experience out there. How'd you like the setup, and what was your biggest takeaway from the experience?
Yeah, so I like the experience a lot. You know, it was my first time on the West Coast. When I was in Arizona training, that was my first time on the West Coast. But going to LA was my first time ever. I've never been to LA before, so that was my first time. And just, you know, the hotel we stayed in was beautiful. The coaches they had, I was able to pick their brains, you know, talk to them throughout the whole entire week. And then it was just a good environment to be around, a lot of good players and things like that. So it was enjoyable for sure.
Yeah, Sean, I've been going to that Intercontinental now for like the last 3 years. I'm still trying to figure out the elevator setup there, you know?
Oh my God, I still haven't figured it out. I couldn't do it the last day I was there. I still didn't know where to go.
And I know our guy Von Hutchins can feel our pain there. Von, what do you got for Sean?
Yeah, Sean, man, I just wanted to ask, like, now is the age of the modern athletic linebacker. Give me some names that you kind of compare yourself to your game. What do you like in your style to?
You know, I watch a lot of Deion Jones, Michael Kendricks, Darius Leonard, Telvin Smith. You know what I'm saying? Like, they were all, you know, guys that were considered undersized a little bit, you know, coming in at 225. What was Telvin Smith, 212 when he came out of college. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a different game for sure, I believe in. Like, you got to cover slots. Like, I don't feel like you can be 270 and run with Tariq Hill. Like, it's going to be tough. So, you know, I'm definitely in a good era. I was blessed to be a part of this era with these linebackers. So it's been good.
Absolutely.
Our way around the room, John Murphy from the Toronto Argonauts is here, and he has a question for you.
Hey, Sean, how's everything going?
How you doing?
Doing good. So tell me about somebody that you guys faced in the last couple of years that you're looking forward to now matching up with at the next level, but you think has just as good a chance to impress folks at the next level the same as you do.
Are you talking about can he be already graduated in NFL?
Sure, yeah. Just somebody you played against that really just jumped out at you in terms of, you know, when you watch film or then competed against them.
Yeah, so Probably, I would say the best player I've seen I play against personally was Quentin Nelson for sure. That was my first game of the year. They killed us. Notre Dame killed us. They beat us like 49-16. But he was a senior and he was just like on everything where he's supposed to be. Blocks, comes down. So I definitely want that match. I want to see that matchup again. I want to see him in real time now with the Colts. So definitely Quentin Nelson.
Love that. That's dog versus dog right there.
Yeah, he's a dog for sure.
1 through 10. How would you rate your performance against in that game?
Against Notre Dame?
Yeah.
1 being the worst?
Yes.
About a 3.
Oh wow. Okay. All right. So we won't tell the NFL scouts.
It's all right. It was my sophomore year. It was my first game ever starting, so I was a little nervous.
Hey, we're all improving and getting better, as our guy Joe Everett can tell you. Joe, what do you got for Sean?
Sean, I think you earned your single digit as a junior. Of all the accomplishments you've got on the field, the accolades that you've received, where does that rank, earning that single digit and having your teammates voted you to that?
That is probably the number one for me. Coming out of high school, didn't really have a lot of accolades. Probably none, if any, maybe one. But, you get to college and the first thing they tell you about is a single digit tough and how, what this means and a legacy you leave behind when you get this numbers and stuff like that. So I worked for those first 2 years to try to get that. When I finally got it, I feel like a relief, man, I'm doing something right. I'm going in the right path. So definitely, I even cried when I got it, when I got to my room. Don't tell nobody that though. Well, I just told everybody in the interview, but you know what I'm saying? So definitely one of my favorite ones.
I would go over to Ryan Roberts for the next question. What do you got, Ryan?
Yeah, man. So got to see you a lot, Sean, over the last couple of years. I'm right over the bridge in Jersey, man. So I'm well aware of this Temple defense over the last couple of years. We're supposed to have Harrison on today too. Just talk to me a little bit about that defensive reputation you guys are building, man. I feel like every year there's some dogs coming out of Temple. What is that relationship like on that defensive side of the football?
Yeah, we that's something we take pride in, man. When I first got here, that's what it was, the Temple tough defense, with Tyler and Hassan and Tavon and all those guys. So they were my older heads and they just continued to pass it down. They showed us how to run it and that's how we carried it, in every workout. The defense always does things together. We're always doing stuff together, whether it's just in small groups or bigger groups. We always hang out. We're always bonding and stuff like that, going over our stuff. So we take pride in that, man, being aggressive, physical, talking trash, just being on our stuff. So big. I love that. It's my favorite part.
I've been coming through Temple for so long. I remember, when nobody came out to the pro day, and now you guys have just about every team represented. You mentioned those guys, Tyler Matakevich and Hassan Reddick and Tavon Young, and even last year, Rocky Sin came in and did his duties. But however, I believe in terms of this year's draft class, I think you and Isaiah Wright are the last two guys that were actually recruited by Coach Matt Rule. Is that correct?
From the class coming out?
Yeah.
And Chappelle Russell.
Okay. Well, take us through that whole recruiting process. What was it like? When did you first meet Coach Rule, and how did he sway you to come to Temple?
Yeah, so I played 1 year of high school football. I had the injury bug, and they were little injuries. They weren't like major surgery injuries, but so I had 3 injuries in high school. Senior year, played my whole senior year, had one offer. I had Rhode Island after high school was over. Coach Rule came in maybe like 5 days before signing day. It was like, hey, Coach Fran actually said, hey, we like you. We want to work you out. Things like that. Can you guys still see me?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, so he said, we want to work you out. We want to take you down to a little workout. So they brought me to a workout, worked me out a little bit, came to one of my games. Boom, I was on a visit that week. Committed that week, and that was the end of it. I had 2 offers. That was Rhode Island and Temple. So that was it.
Not a hard choice to make.
Not at all. Not at all.
Coach Rule is on it. I know Dane has got another question for you here. What do you got, Dane?
Yeah, hey, Sean, we kind of touched on Chappelle here and some of the Temple Tough and your teammates and the culture you guys have built. But for you and Chappelle, I mean, at this time when obviously with social distancing and can't always get together for workouts and stuff, but talk to us a little bit about your guys' relationship. Obviously, technically, you guys are kind of competing for the attention of an NFL team, but at the same time, how are you guys pushing one another, man?
Yeah, me and Chappelle have been close for years now. When I first got in here, he was one of the first people I met in here. Always hung out with him. We've always been around each other. We was in the same room for so many years. So that's like my brother's family to me. So, we always push each other. And that's why we if you're around us enough, you'll hear us start talking trash to each other. Like it'll get, maybe sometimes it might sound like it's serious, but it's not. Like we just do that. That's how we motivate each other, regardless of what we're doing. So, we always talk now. I text him like, yo, what teams you been talking to? Like, how everything going? So, he's in Jersey and I'm in Philly. So we're not really pushing each other in terms of what I'm saying? Because we're not next to each other, but we definitely keep in contact and things like that.
Yeah, you guys both showed up and showed out there in LA and Pasadena. We're going to get you out of here soon. We're working on trying to get your teammate Harrison Hand on here, and hopefully we have him in a few minutes. Give me the Sean Bradley scouting report on Harrison, and be kind because I'm going to ask him the same question now. So what can you tell us about Harrison and his talent? What does he bring to the table?
Freakishly athletic. And he's really, really smart, fundamentally sound football player. Harry was a senior in high school when I was a freshman, I think, at Temple. And he used to come around. This was when Coach Rule was still there. He used to come around with Coach Fran. Always used to be around the facility and things like that. So we knew Harry for a minute. But when he went to Baylor and came back, we was all hyped because, Harry's right in the backyard. But he's a really good person, good personality. And he wants this. This is ever since I met Harry, the first thing he's always told me was, I got to get to the NFL. I want to get to the NFL. So his work ethic is unmatched. And like I said, he's freakishly athletic. So he's a really good player to me.
All right, Sean. Well, listen, I appreciate you hopping on here. I've been a big fan. I actually I texted Hassan before I went to go watch you this year, and I said, I already knew the answer to the question. I said, who do I need to look out for on that defense? He said, Sean Bradley's your guy, and I'm seeing where you land. I know the Giants can use some linebacker help, so hopefully you can stay here in Jersey. But wherever you land, my man, I'm sure I'll be catching up with you at a training camp somewhere across the country. So hang in there, stay safe, and any parting shots, anything you want to tell the listening audience, shout outs, thank yous, anything you want to put out there?
Yeah, just thank you for reaching out, all you guys. Appreciate you guys reaching out and taking your time out to do this. Yeah, I'm just ready to go. It's time to make something happen.
Absolutely. Appreciate you, Sean. Hey, hang in there, my man. We're about 50 hours away from finding out where you're going to land. So look forward to it. And, we'll chat soon, my man.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Yeah, man. Good luck this week.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Got it. So, there you go, Sean Bradley. We're waiting for Nick Tiano. Dakota, does Nick have the link here? Because his agents have only hit me up about 5 times since I've been on the air looking for that link. Can we make that happen? And also, I know ESPN Hawaii, the chances are there's a pretty good chance they were watching this live stream. I don't want to say that I blew you off, but hey, hit me up. I'll get back on the show. We'll do it again, even though it's like a 3 a.m. radio appearance. I thought Joe was on it. We're going around the horn here. We got a few minutes, I guess, until Nick joins us. Dakota, are we on this, man, or what's going on, brother? Are you on top?
Nick is having issues with the link right now. I keep resending it and tell him to rejoin, but I keep working on it.
All right. Well, we got to get their camp on the same page, man. They've only emailed me about 27,000 times to have him on the show, and now we got him on the show, and he's nowhere to be found. So with that being said, let's go back to the chat room, fellas. We're talking, I guess, safety prospects. We kind of covered that pretty much in depth, and they want to know who are some of the sleepers or who have good value at the safety position. Joe, Javon White is a guy that's going to be on the show here in a minute. He's a pretty good mid to late round guy, but I did my mock draft. I only had Jeremy Chin in the first round, and that's because I feel like Seattle could see him in that Cam Chancellor kind of mold. Grant Delpit is like the forgotten man in this year's draft. if Delpit doesn't go round one, I have a very hard time taking Xavier McKinney in round one. How many safeties do you even see coming off the board in round one, Joe?
I've got two. I think Delpit and then McKinney finds his way in there. Chin to me is just right on the edge there, I think. But if you interchange those, I still have two. I think like just sheer numbers. It's hard to get work as a safety in the league. I mean, there's a lot of good players, and every year we do this, I'm looking at the safety board, looking like, yeah, I'd like him on my team. Put him on the roster, and it's like. You get down to it, it's like my two Notre Dame guys, Gilman and then Elliott. Well, I don't even know if Elliott even gets drafted. Gilman, who knows? There's a guy who's at the PA game, Miller from Baylor. I love his game, and boy, he'll show up and give you a tattoo because you're leaving home with a mark for later. But where does he fit in the draft? It's that numbers game is really tough at that safety position. And the guy we're going to talk to, Javen, I would put him above them. I mean, that's that tier, I think third tier, second tier, wherever it fits in. But if he doesn't get his name called, I mean, that's really should have alarm bells to just how difficult it is to get drafted. I mean, that's just the overflow of names. And then where do you put the Winfield kid from Minnesota with his NFL bloodlines? I think I hear a lot of talk about Winfield being a day one, but I just don't see it once again. I mean, like stack up the names, do the numbers, do the math. I think he's day two, but you're going to see a lot of good, like if Chin, Winfield, our guy Sneed's in there in day two, that's just real good eats in rounds 2 and 3.
Yeah. And, you mentioned Miller from Baylor and Winfield, who I'm a big fan of, actually. But then, you mentioned Miller from Baylor, and I say, hey, the size is similar, the skill set is similar, and I know Dane, you're a fan of Miller from Baylor. Chris Miller, I believe, the safety there. What can you tell us about that young man?
Well, I think Joe hit the nail on the head, by the way. But I mean, with Chris Miller, the thing I love, I mean, you're looking at a headhunter. And obviously we're in an era where NFL teams and everyone's, vying for safety, and player safety is a paramount concern. And I agree with that. But the thing that I like about Chris Miller is he plays fast, he plays relentless, and he shows up with bad intentions when he gets to the football. He wants to hit you. He wants to let you know that he's a presence in the backfield, and he's got the range to do it from the sideline. But I'll tell you guys what, man, I think you have some real quality depth. I agree that, Antoine Winfield, I'll tell you right now, NFL teams, and particularly when you get to coaches, they love pedigree. They love lineage. They are going to love the fact that he's the son of a Pro Bowl caliber NFL defensive back that has been brought up and trained to play defensive back. So I could see Antoine Winfield sneaking up drafts. I think he has a lot of versatility. I think he's a utility type safety that has some corner, slot, free safety type flexibility. So I think he's going to be real good value. But two guys don't sleep on, man. You got Brandon Jones at Texas, who has kind of been up and down in his 3 years as a starter there for the Longhorns. I've liked his junior tape better than his senior tape. But I'll tell you what, another guy who's very athletic, can cover, can play in the backfield, can play close to the line of scrimmage. I really like his game, as I do Rodney Clemens at SMU. I think that, Clemens didn't always have the ball production, and he's one of those guys that I see more as a late round pick. But again, another rangy, versatile, and athletic player that can fly around and get to the football.
Two of the more forgotten prospects down there in the state of Texas. And, I'm a big fan of Brandon Jones. I had a first-round grade on him before the injuries. So I think that's a guy probably day 3 at this point that's going to outplay a lot of players selected ahead of him on day 1 and day 2. We're going to have, I think, Isaiah Brown from FIU in just a second. Before we get to him, Vaughn, I know you were in LSU and Alabama. I'm going to go to you for the tiebreaker here because I consistently see Xavier McKinney going ahead of Grant Delpit in these mock drafts. However, I just don't see it. I mean, to me, Delpit is the superior player. What am I missing here?
Well, the thing is, once you watch Delpit's course of his season and even going into his junior year, guys are going to beat him up a little bit about the tackling. The inability to consistently get down players in space. And as a safety, that's something that you have to do. Xavier has a skill set that, I mean, guys, like he has the versatility to play in the box and play pass, and he's athletic. Both those guys are athletic. My personal feeling is that I bet on Delpit. I like Delpit's pedigree. I like his attitude. I like the guy, and I like his skill set. Both of those guys are going to be productive NFL players, but in my opinion, I would like to go with Grant. And just as another guy that's kind of, like you say, a forgotten man in the SEC and the ACC, two of them, J.R. Reed. No one's really talking about J.R. Reed much. He didn't go to an all-star game, didn't participate in any of that. I don't know what his medical looks like, but there's not much conversation about him. He's had a productive career at the University of Georgia. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him on draft day. And another guy that people forget about on that Clemson defense is Kayvon Wallace. An undersized safety. He's in that 5'11" range, but he's thick. He's a sturdy build. He's a guy that, like Dane said, as far as with Winfield, he has the versatility to potentially be able to play in the slot as well as free safety. He has those cover skills that NFL teams covet. He's a cover 4 type safety. He's a guy that can play coverage and get guys down in space. He can run the alley and tackle. So those two names are going to be names that are going to be mid-round guys that are going to be productive NFL players for a long time, in my opinion.
Yeah, Kayvon Wallace is a good one because I think he's right there on the, putting together the top 100. It's like I could see him right there, round 3, round 4. And then Tanner Muse came out of nowhere. I was not expecting that combine performance from a Tanner Muse. But, Grant Delpit is a hot topic, and I want to go over to John because that's your neck of the woods here. It feels like he's been on our radar now for like at least 3 years. All of a sudden now we're 3 days away, and nobody's got Grant Delpit anywhere near their mock round draft. What's going on here?
Yeah, I think sometimes with guys, that the more you're seeing, the more you can kind of nitpick, at things, with a guy. And then when you're talking about taking a player at a position that's not always seen as a pure top 10 or, high first round caliber guy, you're going to have to say like, hey, every category is going to have to be, at the level of that type of guy. And I think that the tackling is what is probably, kind of deterring that the most. And then when you look at it and say, okay, now you start saying there's 3 or 4 offensive tackles and, 2 or 3 quarterbacks and things like that. When you start just trying to slot in where you would take him versus, other guys that are available, I think that's what kind of has started the slide. And then I think, unfortunately, this is where people make mistakes also, right? Where you've seen that volume of film and how much he's played and how much production there is in these big games against consistently top 5, 10, top 20 teams that they play against, over and over and over again. And you're forgetting that some of the missed plays that he has are against other guys that are going to play on Sunday. And some of the plays that other people are making are against guys that are not going to be anywhere near the field on, Sundays. And I think that's, to me, what's happened with him, is the volume of playing your way and having so many games under your belt. You start kind of nitpicking at some of his game, but the tackling is a big deal. I think another guy would be, Aston Davis. What kind of medical grade are you getting on that kid? And if it is clear, and if there's nothing, going to be wrong with them, long term, that's probably a guy that's going to, see a high volume of attention, a late first day or, into the, early, part of the second round. But I think that there is it's a position that clearly it's a market that's built on what are you asking that player to do. And then I think you see that's why a team could, like you're saying, Jeremy Chin could be the first one off the board. McKinney could be the first one off the board. Delpit could still be the first one off the board. Or any or all of those guys are still there in the second round.
All right. Rick Saratella here on NFL Draft Bible Live with Joe Everett, John Murphy, Dane Vandenat, Von Hutchins, Ryan Roberts. It's the Hollywood Squares affair. It's live. So we have technical difficulties. We went through yesterday very smoothly. Smoother than my daughter's behind. Today we're having a lot of problems, technical difficulties for Ike Brown. So with that being said, I'm going to go over to the next question here. And Ryan, I'll go over to you because somebody wants to know about quarterback strategy. And we saw several years ago, the Redskins needed a quarterback. They took RG3 in the first round, and then they came back and took Kirk Cousins in like the third or fourth round. The question coming in is with the Dolphins, obviously they have Ryan Fitzpatrick as a stopgap kind of hold the fort guy, but he'll probably be out of town in a year or two. With Josh Rosen, he might get dealt come draft. The question came in specifically for Miami, but it can apply to any team. What are your thoughts on drafting a quarterback in the first round and then coming back in, say, the fourth round to draft a guy like James Morgan? Is that something that the Dolphins or another team can implement?
I mean, I think it's a strategy. You're trying to upgrade the room in general. I don't know if it's so much of you're trying to cover your bases in case your first round pick wasn't the guy that you thought he potentially could be. I just feel like it's upgrading a room in general. I mean, we saw the New England Patriots consistently do that for years where they're drafting, taking guys like Matt Castle and Jimmy Garoppolo. They're just adding talent to the room, and how that room ultimately ends up shaping out in the future is, obviously a little bit of a wild card, specifically guys drafted on the third day. You don't even know if they're going to make the team. Maybe they're a practice squad guy. And the league is now becoming, most teams are only carrying two quarterbacks now. So I think it's a competition thing more than anything. But I think it's the good teams are constantly trying to upgrade positions. Not just the number one player, it's the depth. That's where great teams are made. Obviously, creating depth at multiple positions. So I think it's just, upgrading. If you're not comfortable with your backup quarterback situation, upgrade it. It's a valuable position to have.
Yeah, Ryan makes a good point, Joe, that a lot of teams do only carry two quarterbacks now. So I go back even to the days of where Heath Schuler went in round 1, Gus Frerotte went in round 7, and a year or two, Frerotte was the starter. Is this still a relevant strategy here in 2020? Because to Ryan's point, usually you carry one backup quarterback and then your emergency guy is on the practice squad nowadays.
You only have to go back a few years to the Redskins, right? RG3 plus Kirk Cousins. I dare say that panned out for them. And I think, Ryan, like, that's the theme that a team would be to do this. You're just upgrading the room. Like, we've got one guy maybe, and like he might not be here that long. So let's draft two players. So I think it's a sound strategy if you really are in severe need of a whole different picture in the quarterback room. And maybe you've got a new quarterback coach to where it's like, we just don't have a fit for the change we've just made this offseason. And that's why you'd really aggressively get after it. But I don't think it's too far-fetched. I'm not certain that it's in this quarterback class particularly, but it's definitely a strategy that you can see play out.
Dane, take us inside the war room during your time with the Raiders. I mean, how did you view the quarterback position? Was that something that you were looking to kind of always improve, whether it was starter, backup, quality? What was your perspective on that?
Well, my perspective may be a little skewed because, of course, I started with Jamarcus Russell over there and, kind of worked our way. But, I mean, the thing is, you have to always be looking to upgrade your quarterback position. And Vaughn will attest for this, but I mean, for 2 years that I was with the Raiders, both in 2011 and 2016. 2016, we made the playoffs. 2011, we should have made the playoffs. We started out 7-4 and had the division in the wraps. But in both years, we lost our starting quarterback. In both years, we didn't have a good enough backup quarterback to go out and go win playoff football games. And it's not easy to find those guys. Lord knows there's not 32 starters in the world, but for right now, you as an NFL team, you must always be looking and critically evaluate your backup quarterback position to make sure that, hey, if you lose your starter, whether it's for the short term or to a long-term injury, what position is your organization going to be in? Because as I learned in both those occasions, you're only one snap away from needing your entire franchise to go on the back of a new player. Now, to kind of the other point, you're talking about the Redskin example or even the Patriot one, but Bill Walsh was always an advocate of every year you ought to draft a quarterback. And I remember going back to after the 49ers lost Steve Young, they drafted Giovanni Carmazzi out of Hofstra there up in New York, Ricky,
Yes.
in the 3rd round. And then they took Tim Rattay out of Louisiana Tech in the 7th round. Well, they obviously presumed that Giovanni Carmazzi was going to be the franchise future, and Tim Ray was good value. But it turned out that Carmazzi, I mean, for whatever reason, I wasn't around. I don't know why it didn't work out, but it didn't work out. They found that out early, but Tim Rattay did. And he stuck around in the NFL for a long time as a backup, and then went to things like the UFL and a couple other organizations and found some success. So, I always think, and I've always been an advocate, that you need to always be having a developmental quarterback in your farm system that's going to be ready and capable to get on in there and execute if and when you end up losing your starter.
I think Jim Druckenmiller was in that draft too, if I'm not mistaken, going back there with the.
He's a couple years earlier, yeah.
Okay, there you go. Right around the same time frame. Well, it's quite a bit of time has passed. Dan, I'm going to stick with you though, because you brought up Jamarcus Russell. And to me, that was before the whole new CBA where, now if you take a 1st round quarterback and he busts, it's not as much of a financial strain. Back before the new CBA, when you took a 1st round quarterback, you were invested heavily in that guy and you kind of had to stick with him. Is there any lesson to be learned looking back at that whole situation, just from a scouting or evaluation standpoint? I'm sure there's probably several, but anything that we can pass forward here that you came away from that whole process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all know that Al Davis coveted the size, the arm strength, the physical and athletic talents of Jamarcus Russell. And Jamarcus Russell, I mean, as Mike Mayock, famously said, went on to have the best pro day he's ever seen. Obviously, we know quarterback pro days are scripted. They're thrown to their wide receivers. They have the timing and the routes down with everything. So it's easy to manipulate it from that standpoint. But I always went back. I remember when Reggie McKenzie came on to the Raiders, and he told us, and of course, Reggie McKenzie is all about University of Tennessee. And, he hated LSU just from being a Vol and everything else. But I remember him telling me that he went to a game of Tennessee versus LSU that year Jamarcus was coming out. And Jamarcus came out for pregame and his shoes were untied and his shirt wasn't tucked in and just kind of went out there and went through the motions. And at that point, Reggie McKenzie said that he knew that Jamarcus Russell didn't have what it takes to be a successful leader, a successful NFL franchise quarterback. And, I saw similar things when I was there, and Jamarcus, he's the last one out to practice and the first one to leave. And I'm not just trying to turn this into a Jamarcus bashing, scene or scenario, but I mean, when you're playing quarterback in the NFL, just like we talked about yesterday or earlier, when you got to go into a huddle now and look 10 guys in the eye and be able to convey a lot of self-efficacy, a lot of confidence, and going down there, we're going to go win the game and have that Joe Montana, Joe Cool type persona. You need to have that inside of you. You need to have those intrinsic self-motivators, and you just can't always coach those things up. So, the takeaway from that whole ordeal, and you're absolutely right, a lot of that led to the new collective bargaining agreement. But, because you don't want to hamstring, franchises if they make a bad choice. But, certainly when you're evaluating quarterbacks, you have to look at their body of work. You have to look at their performances, the things that motivate them, the things that get them going, find out about their work habits. Paramount is their intellect and their ability to quickly process information. All those things, I think teams have really come a long ways in the recent future and getting better at evaluating quarterbacks.
Doubt about it. Dan Vandernet, Von Hutchins, Joe Everett, Ryan Roberts, John Murphy, Rick Saratella here breaking it down. I see Javon White is in the meeting room. Dakota, do we have him? Are we going to have Javon White today, or what's going on there, brother?
It doesn't show that he is in our waiting room, so.
All right, well, we'll wait and see if you can figure that out. In the meantime, I'm going to go to non-combine invites that you guys think have a chance of getting drafted. And I got two that we actually had out at the NFL Bowl, and that's two guys with Jersey connections. Surprise. Damon Hayes and Rondell Carter. One guy who hails from Rutgers, another guy who transferred from Rutgers. But both of these guys, we talked about Nick Tiano coming out and throwing that big 50-yard bomb in the first half. It was against Damon Hayes. And credit to our guy Riley McKenzie. You know, he turned to me and said, you know what? He's going to be all right. And Damon Hayes has got the size. He's got the speed. He's got the pedigree. We had Brian Lewerke on yesterday talking about Cody White and Darryl Stewart. Damon Hayes had some personal issues that week of the Michigan State game leading up to the game. He didn't play the first half. So Cody White came out. I think he had like 7 catches for $157 in the first half. Here comes Damon Hayes off the bench, like John Starks, the 6th man award, and just shuts down Cody White the entire second half. And I said, you know, this guy is a legit dude. Rondell Carter started at Rutgers, went down to James Madison. Really liked what I saw when I went to James Madison earlier in the season. I thought he held his own out at the NFLPA Bowl in terms of going up one-on-one against the top caliber talent. So I think both of these guys have a chance, 6th, 7th round. I'm expecting to hear either one or maybe both of these guys have their name called during the NFL draft. Let's go over to Ryan, who you got as a non-combine invite selection.
The first guy that came to mind for me was Kevin Dotson, the offensive lineman out of Louisiana, Lafayette. And the guy that gets a lot of talk on that offensive line is Handy Hunt, the right tackle. It's going to move inside the guard. I like him a good deal. I feel like Dotson is pretty scheme dependent. I don't think he's a guy that fits too well into an inside or outside zone system, but creates a lot of power in short spaces. He's a big guy, powerful. So if you're running a gap power scheme that, you know, is not asking for too much movement, just asking for you to, you know, drive block and do those physical things, I think Dotson has a lot of ability to be that way. I just feel like he's a little athletically limited, so I don't anticipate him hearing his name until somewhere on day 3. But I think as a developmental guy in a power system, I like Kevin Dotson a decent amount.
Yeah, both Dotson and Handy Hunt, I think, kind of flying under the radar leading up to the draft. Joe, who's a non-combine invite, and typically we have about 30 guys drafted that weren't invited to the combine. I think that number will be fewer because of the lack of pro days, maybe 15 to 20. But who's somebody that you got?
Well, it's a Raging Cajuns love fest, y'all. Jamarcus Bradley, Louisiana Lafayette. I mean, I watched every practice at the East-West from day one of practice and in the game. This kid was on it. No doubt in my mind. Bradley, to me, was the best receiver there. I hope I'm out on an island on him because I believe in the kid. He's an athlete, option quarterback from high school, just a easy mover, natural ball handler. When he gets it in his hands, he's going to do something with it. I just thought, too, he looks to me like he's got special teams experience as a kick returner. I think that's a draftable player. And I also agree with what Ryan said on Dotson. At practices, he was looking really good there at East-West. I think it almost relates to the little chat question that we've got. You know, do some prospects get penalized for playing on a team that was not that good? And maybe that's the case with some of these fellas that didn't get combine even invites, because I think Bradley, to me, that's a guy who's not necessarily a starter right now, but you want to get him in late day 3 as developmental, because he's just a good player to have, a versatile player on your roster.
Well, Louisiana is a hotbed for talent, so I got to go over to Vaughn here because Dotson, Handy Hunt, Bradley, any thoughts on those players? And then, you know, anybody that you have as a non-combine invite to get drafted.
I mean, for me, right off top, just like everybody else said, it was Dotson. Obviously, man, when you go into the school and you hear the coaches talk about him from a power standpoint, from production standpoint, it's exactly what you want to hear. Athletically, he is limited. Like the guys said, he's not going to be for everybody. He's a guard only, and he's a power scheme guard only. But these teams that do see value in that type of player will see value in him, and they may want to grab him for sure commodity, as opposed to trying to reach it for a guy that at the end of the day, when you're talking about undrafted free agency over Zoom, we have no clue what's going to happen in that perspective. So you may as well grab who you may think could be a potential starter or have those type of abilities. You may as well grab them late 6th and 7th. Other guys that pop up to me, Levante Taylor, getting us right back to the same mindset. Obviously, he's shorter. Obviously, there's some things that you have to kind of overlook as far as from a size perspective in that regard. But you're talking about a Power 5 football team in Florida State. You're going to all scouts go in there. They've had plenty of information on him. He's not a small school guy where you have to guess, and you may not have had many scouts go into the school. I just think that this year is going to be a little bit different as far as reaching for guys. I think executives, decision makers are going to go to and rely on the people in these buildings, in the schools, and they're going to trust what they say. So if this coach at Florida State is telling them, hey, this is a smart guy, he's tough, he's versatile, he can fit into the next level, there were just a bunch of things that went on here that weren't advantageous to him, they're going to take heed to that advice because there's not as much information that they've been able to gather during this springtime on the smaller school prospects. So I think that some of these larger school guys will have an opportunity to kind of be drafted when in previous years that could have went to the smaller school guys.
Make a good point about the whole Zoom situation setup, and in the past where you might feel like you have a guy that you can snag in that undrafted free agent process. I can't wait to hear all the stories about, we thought we had this guy and, we had a technical glitch or the internet wasn't working or the phone lines, the communication. I mean, if the NFL Network and ESPN were smart, they would keep those cameras in the war rooms on following the draft for all the undrafted free agent frenzy. Quickly, Dane, do you have a non-combine invite? Would you be quick to pull the trigger in round 7 as opposed to playing that whole, hey, we love to have you. We think you're a Raider, and but we're going to call you when the draft is over.
Yeah, and there's obviously, like you're alluding to, there's a lot of that going on. And, it's one of those where you might as well just grab that guy that you really like. But a couple of guys that were down at the NFLPA Bowl that I think are being overlooked a bit, and I think early have a chance, or one, your Temple Tough, going back to him, but Jovan Fair, the guard over there, he is, athletic. I thought he had one of the better showings down at the NFLPA Bowl. He acquitted himself. I really like his mental makeup. I like his versatility. I think teams are going to find good value with him initially as an interior swing player who can eventually get up there and challenge for a starting position and with a little bit of development. And then also Jonah Williams, the defensive lineman from Weber State, a guy that I'll tell you what, a lot of West Coast scouts are secretly fired up about Jonah Williams. He's tough. He's blue collar. He's got great length. He's versatile to be able to play in odd and even man fronts, and he goes nonstop. He is a bring it with his lunch pail type guy, and his motor never fades. So 2 guys that were down at the PA game with us. I was surprised they didn't get combine invites. If you asked me, I would have told you certainly that they would have gotten one. But guys that I think are, teams really are going to like. And I'm surprised Vaughn didn't throw out Brandon Walton from FAU, man.
Oh, good.
I thought he should have been down there also. I steal yours, Rick. If I did, I apologize.
No, I think, Brandon Walton's a great one because I think he has a chance. If you told me he was going to be the highest player selected from the NFLPA Bowl, I would not be surprised. So really good names. Jovan Fair, talk about a forgotten man in this whole process. I mean, this guy could go undrafted and wind up outplaying a lot of guys that are drafted. John, I didn't want to get into your guys because it's kind of a conflict of interest there. So what we'll do is we'll get into our parting shots here. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties with some of our guests. We'll get them on the horn. We'll get them on after they're drafted. Javon White and Nick Tiano. I know Isaiah Coulter is a guy, and Aaron Parker, the Rhode Island guys that we'll have on throughout the week. Maybe after they get drafted, we'll have them on during our live stream coverage, get their instant reaction in terms of where their destinations are and where they'll be going. John, since you've been waiting so patiently over there, we'll kick it off to you for the parting shot of our day 2 live stream coverage, baby. Oh, my dancing shoes are getting ready. Go ahead.
Well, I don't mind giving a shout out, even if it is a conflict of interest. A guy that caught my eye. I was at Tulane in Houston on a Thursday night, and at the end of the game, Houston actually called a timeout, and the daddy for the Tulane tight end is sitting right in front of us. He turns around and looks at me and my daughter and says, "Man, what do you think they should do?" And I literally just said jokingly, "Man, they should just throw everybody to one side and throw it up to McCleskey, and they'll probably score." Off the timeout, that's exactly what happened. And the whole place went nuts, including his daddy. But I think that's a kid that if they had a pro day, he would have run 4.3 or better. And his daddy played in the NFL. And he was productive at Oklahoma State. And even if he never catches a pass in the NFL, the athletic ability and that toughness that he has as being a former player's son who just knows how to do everything the right way. When you can run 4.3 like that, and you're very coachable, and you're a really smart kid of how to play football, that talent will allow you to beat out a lot of people when they put you in the positions to do things that no one has done before, a lot in terms of experience at the college level. You put that kid now as a gunner, you put that kid now in some special team situations, and all of a sudden he's the 6th or 7th receiver, but he's the best teamer. And little by little, he makes his way. And I hope that's his upside, and that's what happens. And I have a really good comfort zone for him if it doesn't. And the Hawaii quarterback would be another one. I am a huge Cole McDonald fan. I have a pretty good idea where his secondary income could come if it doesn't come in the NFL. But I'm saying that the thing that you guys said was that when you have the oomph, right, to go out there and make some of those throws and some of those plays that he has the willingness to attempt to make, even though it is ballsy to do, right? And it is turnover prone and it doesn't look great sometimes, in the stat sheet. But the factor that that kid will make those turnovers and then double down and come back and try to make that same throw and that play again, to me, yeah, there's some rough edges to it. There's a lot of natural athletic ability, right? Sub 4.6 to go on top of it. But the number of throws he was able to make and the number of pass attempts he was able to take there at Hawaii, he just has a little bit of something that you would want in those later rounds if you were just saying, I have my quarterback room and it's a really good room, and I'm going to take this kid who's a complete wild card and put him in there, because you don't have that match of just, arm, athletic ability, and the willingness to make that bad turnover once or twice in the first half of games and come back and make the plays that he did at times in the 3rd and 4th quarter to get his team back in games. He is literally a kid that can throw you into trouble and then throw you out of trouble. And I think those are the kind of guys late in the draft or even as priority free agents that are somebody's going to bang on the table to say, like, hey, there's something there more to look at or work with.
And if it doesn't work out, Cole McDonald, John Murphy just rolled out the red carpet for you to Toronto.
Yeah, I'll figure out a way to quarantine you to get you in.
And I will say this, in 3 or 4 years, that freshman quarterback Cordero, I'm excited about too. John, I'll stick with you. Parting shot for the people.
Oh, so you want more?
Oh, that was your parting shot. All right, Ryan Roberts, parting shot for the people.
I'm just excited again for the draft to finally get here. We're getting into the zone now. Rick's dancing every day now. It's great stuff. Here in the Justin Herbert to New York Giants at 4 yesterday really kind of made the clock go a little faster, man. I'm tired of these rumors. I just want to see what happens.
Yeah, the smoke signals are adding fumes to the fire. I mean, we're talking about the Giants taking a quarterback now. We've got too much time on our hands. Thank God, Joe, it didn't push the draft back, because I think we need this in our lives. Give us a parting shot for the people.
Well, I was just kind of piqued my interest, that last question in the chat. Do good players get knocked on their draft value for playing on a bad team? And absolutely that happens. But I think there's two sides to the coin. Like, I'd give you Stephen Diggs, the Maryland receiver. That was a terrible team, but a great prospect, a really highly touted I don't know if he's 4 or 5 star out of high school, but you knew the kid could play. You knew he could do special teams. And to me, that was a head scratch when he fell as far as he did. But on the other side, Will Hernandez was on one of the worst UTEP teams I've ever seen play football. Did they win 1 game or 2? But still, Hernandez game prevailed. When you watched him play, you knew you're not only watching a pro, but you're watching an aggro guy that will play every last snap just to embarrass you. And I think every offensive line coach that watched Hernandez was just licking their chops. So the NFL will still find you, I think, is my prevailing thought. If you got game, they'll know your name.
Well, that leads me to the tweet that Vaughn just had. You got talent, we will find you. I love that video you put out there. But Vaughn, parting shot for the people, brother.
Well, for me, it's really, I know we talked about safeties a little bit, and the intriguing names that consistently pop up end up being Jeremy Chin, Kyle Duggar, those types of body types. Which one of those guys goes first? Isaiah Simmons, I'll throw him in the mix of, obviously he's a linebacker safety type from Clemson, but just big, versatile defensive players. Where do they go? Where do they mix? How do they mix in with the group, whether it's safety, whether it's linebacker, whether it's dime linebacker? How do defensive coordinators in this new modern age of using the tight end, putting your receivers into the slot, bringing Lamar Jackson being able to run the football, how do these big defenders be able to mix into defensive coordinators' game plans to evolve to try to take away some of these offensive advantages that the league has presented?
And that safety position continues to evolve in the NFL. And parting shot over to Dane Vandernat for the final thought of the day. What do you got for us, Dane?
Yeah, my shot is, there's no surprise Vaughn's talking about DBs down there with his, Could have picked that one. But you know what? I'm going to go on the other side of the ball, and I'm going to say don't be sleeping on offensive linemen. It's sexy to talk about the Mickey Browns of the world and, some of the top left tackle type candidates, but oftentimes you can find some real good value in the mid and late rounds and offensive linemen who are going to play for 7, 8, 9, 10 years in the league. If they're smart, if they're tough, if they've got size, and if they've got a little bit of athleticism. You look at guys like Danny Pinter and Kyle Hinton and some of those, Brandon Walton, who we talked about, just good mid to late round picks who are really going to make an offensive line coach happy by the way they play the game and by the traits that they're bringing.
We talked about it yesterday. Offensive guard, the highest percentage position of signing that second contract in the NFL. I do think teams value that, and that's why, I don't know who the candidates are in that second and third round, but I think, all this talk about, hey, there's no guards inside the top 100. Oh, there will be some guards. Believe you me. It's just hard. This year's draft class is so evenly rated, it's just hard to identify which guys those are. So here we are, just past 12 o'clock, 2 hours of power, and we're here again tomorrow at 10 a.m. We'll be here all week long, in fact, 14 hours of live stream coverage. So here's the deal I'm putting out on the table to our guests, and I need all of your support and your help in the chat room, your comment section, on Twitter. I need to get these guys out of the chair. That's my goal. By the end of the week, somebody's going to move something. Somebody's going to get out the chair and groove with me. So, I'm going to cue up another song. Here's the deal I'm willing to make with my hosts. Okay. The first co-host, get up out of that chair and dance with me now, will have the right to pick the song for tomorrow. And if I can't get you out of the chair today, well, then we'll try again tomorrow, and we'll get to choose the song on Thursday, okay? But I will tell you this, NFLDraftBible.com, we can't stop, we won't stop. And I'll tell you what, use that promo code VIP50, get your 50% discount at the NFLDraftBible.com. And I'm going to tell you what, Dakota, You can kill it when you want, but I'm going to play the song that me and Samantha came out to after we got married at our wedding. If I can't get you out of the chair with this one, then I don't know, folks.
I'll put my money on Vaughn.
Who's with me?
I knew I could get the dollar for that one.
Come on, man. We're in a pandemic. People are home, depressed, sad, they're scared. They can't see a couple of scouts dance around with our off-beat, funky selves, man. Come on. Oh, Joe Warrior.
There you go, Joe.
Yeah,
I mean, that's how I.
some fans today. Yeah, baby.
Beastie Boys sure
wanted to
shot.
pick
It should
that
be the
song.
theme.
What you got for us tomorrow, man?
There's definitely some weakness with that athleticism right there.
That's why I'm not even priority free agent. Like
Lower
that's
body.
just
Get
UDFA.
out of the chair. Tomorrow, I'm going to get you out of the chair. I promise you. It's my mission.
Kind of more of a stiff lower body right there.
Rigid. Stiff isn't the word. Rigid.
Dead leg.
Fluid right there.
Dead leg.
Fluid.